The regime has been devastated. Its ability to project power abroad has been really wiped out. It can't make nuclear weapons any longer. It can't make more missiles. If this blockade proceeds, if Iran is not able to sell any oil on the world market, the internal pressures from the economic collapse, I think, will really be severe. I think we're looking at mass demonstrations.
The levels of moral defeatism that we've seen in the establishment media in relation to this conflict have horrified me. Is it similar in the United States?
There are some loud people who are disagreeing with this policy, but they really are at the margins. The vast majority of Republicans and the MAGA supporters support what Trump is doing.
Hello, welcome back to the Brendan O'Neill Show with me, Brendan O'Neill, and my special guest this week, Fred Fleitz. Fred, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. I've been following some of the comments you've been making about the situation in the Middle East, the situation in Iran. People will be familiar that you work at the America First Policy Institute, having previously worked in national security under Donald Trump. So you've got lots to say, you've got lots of thoughts. So let's just jump straight in at the deep end. I guess my question is, what's your prognosis for what's going to happen in the Middle East, or where things might go next with the Iran war? How do you think things are panning out?
Well, I'm a little more optimistic than I was a week ago. You may remember that the remnants of the Iranian government said they would not agree to talks with the U.S. unless sanctions were lifted. We agree to a permanent ceasefire. Israel stopped bombing Lebanon, but they did agree to meet with the U.S. They sent a very large delegation to Pakistan. There were 3 rounds of negotiation, including some one-on-one negotiations, which they said they would not do. They'd only negotiate indirectly through Pakistan. That's a traditional demand by the Iranian government, I might add. It was encouraging that we got this far. Now, there wasn't an agreement, but there are reports now that there could be more talks this week. I mean, whenever we're talking, that's good. I think it was Churchill who said that talk is better than war. Maybe he said jaw is better than war. And we want to have talk. We want to have negotiations. On the other hand, President Trump is removing the little leverage that this regime has by demining the Strait of Hormuz and starting to blockade ships that pay tolls to the Iranian government to go through this strait. I think that's going to put incredible pressure on the regime to agree to end this conflict.
So what's your reading on the Islamic Republic's situation at the moment? Because I don't know what the media coverage is like in the US. I have a bit of an idea what it's like there, but in the UK, it can be quite disorientating. I mean, you can watch the BBC News in the evening and get the distinct impression that Iran has got the upper hand. America is on the back foot. America is flailing. The Islamic Republic is really playing some trump cards, no pun intended. And of course, that's a lot of what we're hearing from the left as well. They're saying this is a huge, catastrophic, strategic defeat for America, and the Islamic Republic is much stronger than people thought it would be. Is that all just a misrepresentation of what's going on? What's happening, do you think, behind the scenes in this conflict?
No, it really is. The regime has been devastated. Its ability to project power abroad has been really wiped out. It can't make nuclear weapons any longer. It can't make more missiles. It still has a missile stockpile, but it's dwindling very quickly. And its economy, which already was in bad shape, is in ruins. If this blockade proceeds, if Iran is not able to sell any oil on the world market, the internal pressures from the economic collapse, I think, will really be severe. I think we're looking at mass demonstrations, maybe not immediately, but the Iranian people are fed up with this oppressive regime, which is not just an extreme theocracy, but it's incompetent and corrupt. They can't provide services and water to people in their capital. They were thinking of moving the capital from Tehran because of inadequate services and water. It was so bad before the war. So, I mean, it's just a shame that the left won't report on this accurately. And Tom Friedman of the New York Times recently said, you know, I want Iran to lose, but not if it's a win for Trump. I think that sort of reflects what we're seeing in most of the mainstream media.
Yeah, we've got a lot of that in the UK as well. I mean, the front page of The Economist said advantage is Iran a few weeks ago, and certainly amongst the more left-wing commentary, you can sense a very strong desire for the Islamic Republic either to win or certainly not to lose, because people seem to dislike Trump more than they do this tyrannical regime. Um, so, do you think what we're seeing from the Islamic Republic in terms of its social media posts, which are often quite mocking of Washington, and its bluster that it puts out in relation in its statements that it's making, is that just performative? Is it just an attempt to save face when, in reality, behind the scenes, this could be a regime on its last legs potentially?
Well, the propaganda operation by this regime is still going strong and is feeding into mainstream liberal media that desperately wants to deny win the United States and President Trump. So and you can't believe anything this regime says. I believe there really are leaders in Iran that want to stop the bombing, that want to move on and rebuild the country. But the Revolutionary Guard has so much power in the country, and they have the guns. They don't want to settle. They are extremists. They are fanatics, and they're also pushing this propaganda.
Okay, I want to ask you a bit more of a fundamental question, which is, in your view, what is this war about? Because we do hear conflictual messages, certainly in the coverage. I think the strategy has been, relatively clear from the outset, but in the coverage, we're continually told that America doesn't know what it's doing. One minute it talks about regime change, the next minute it talks about simply getting rid of nuclear capacity. And then, of course, there's Israel, and Israel is still waging war against Iran's proxy armies in Lebanon in particular. So there's a lot going on. So if you had to boil it down, if it's possible to boil it down, what would you say is at stake in this conflict?
Well, President Trump has been clear that Iran can never get a nuclear weapon. That's the primary purpose of this operation. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio said an equally important operation was to prevent Iran from assembling what would essentially been a missile shield by the end of 2026. That if we had not acted in early this year, Iran would have such a sophisticated and large missile arsenal that it would be impossible to take steps to attack its efforts to rebuild its nuclear weapons program. I think Iran is further away from nuclear weapon than many people say. I think they could have an operational weapon maybe in a year and a half to 2 years if we had done nothing. But frankly, that's far too close, and we would have been in a situation by the end of the year that there'd be nothing to do, that nothing we could have done to stop that. So there was a narrow window to stop this program. That's why the U.S. and Israel took action when they did.
It's interesting you say the US and Israel there, because that brings me on to my next question, which is another thing that we hear quite a lot is that America and Israel's interests are diverging or potentially starting to move in different directions. It feels to me a little bit like that's over-egged, or possibly even wishful thinking on the part of certain sections of the commentariat who would like to see America, and certainly would like to see Israel, fail. Is there truth in that? These are two different countries. They are two independent countries. So it would make sense if they didn't have the exact aligned interests. But do you think it's exaggerated when people say there's a divergence taking place?
Well, there's no question that Israel has long wanted to attack Iran because of its concerns about the nuclear program. Israel justifiably believes that an Iranian nuclear weapon is an existential threat to their country. Their country's so small, one weapon could destroy it. And I think that Donald Trump has been more reluctant to do this. He's tried to pursue diplomacy. Netanyahu did not always agree when Trump tried diplomacy, but not using force is always Trump's first choice, to try to use diplomacy to resolve issues. And I think we're at a situation right now where Trump may be a little more interested in winding down the operation than Netanyahu is. I think that's natural because the Israelis are much closer to this conflict. They know that Iran is a country that's been pledging for decades to wipe Israel off the map, and Israeli officials take this very seriously.
Okay, so you are a vice chairman of the America First Policy Institute. So I have to put this question to you. You will be well aware that there are Trump followers, and certainly ex-Trump followers, ex-MAGA people, who are making a lot of noise in the media and especially online, arguing that Trump has betrayed America First principles. And we hear this from some pretty cranky voices, as well as a few more serious voices as well, saying that he's betrayed America First. He's become like the foreign policy establishment that he claimed to want to overhaul and rehabilitate and end the forever wars that they seemed quite keen on pursuing. Do you see the Iranian conflict as a betrayal of his principles? Or do you see it as part of an America First approach?
Well, President Trump confronted this last June when he backed Israel's attack on Iran and when he decided to drop bunker buster bombs on Iranian nuclear sites. He said that he does support his America First approach to U.S. national security, which includes keeping America out of new wars and forever wars. But he also believes that stopping an Iranian nuclear weapon is part of his America First approach. And Trump said, look, I came up with this concept. I decide what's in it. The vast majority of Trump's supporters, MAGA supporters, agreed with that. Not all of them did. People like Tucker Carlson did not. And there's a few others like that. And there are some loud people who are disagreeing with this policy right now. They really are at the margins. The vast majority of Republicans and the MAGA supporters support what Trump is doing. People like Tucker Carlson have a media stage where they can make a lot of noise, but frankly, they don't speak for the majority of Republicans or Trump supporters.
And if you don't mind me asking, what did you make of Trump's recent comments about precisely those kinds of people, particularly Tucker Carlson, but also Candace Owens and a few others, Megyn Kelly too? He laid out a pretty stinging attack on them and said, called them losers and so on in Trump's style. It seemed to me like an effort almost to rescue the Trump project from the kind of conspiracy theories that some of these people are pursuing, and to try and make a clear line between what Trump wants to do and what some of these more hot-headed individuals on the internet are doing.
They're hot-headed. They don't have a lot of credibility. Tucker Carlson and, man, Alex Jones, he's not part of the MAGA movement at all. He is really a far right extremist. I don't even want to see his name mentioned with other people who may or may not be in the MAGA movement. Trump took these people on, but I can tell you that they don't speak for the vast majority of his supporters. But typical Trump, he has a rough edge and he went after them.
Okay, so I want to ask you about Trump's relationship with the foreign policy establishment, because as an outside observer of America, I've always found the foreign policy establishment there quite inscrutable, hard to work out exactly what's going on, hard to work out who's in charge in Washington. Is it the president or is it this foreign policy establishment? Do you think Trump has clarified the relationship between the White House and that establishment? Has he brought it to heel? Is that part of his project?
Well, I think there's a global foreign policy establishment. It's in the UK, it's in the US, it's our foreign service, it's people in your foreign office, it's the JFK School at Harvard University, Georgetown University, Oxford. These people take traditional ways of approaching foreign policy, and Trump has taken unorthodox, different ways. Remember when he met with Kim Jong-un in his first term, which everyone said was a bad idea, seemed to be a pretty good idea, lowered tensions considerably with North Korea. He backed out of the nuclear deal with Iran. I think we know that was exactly the right thing to do, that deal was a fraud. There's always going to be tension between Trump and the establishment people, the people who want to keep doing things the way they've always been done. This is a regime, I don't want to call it a regime, a government that thinks outside the box, has brought in new people to try to come up with new ideas. So I think that tension is always going to be there. And in terms of the government establishment, the State Department, the Defense Department, there's been significant reforms, I think, to get these organizations more in line with the president's policy. So I think they can be more efficient. And, we had problems in the first administration where Trump brought in people who seemed to be really good, but they didn't support what he wanted to do. People like H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, the former Secretary of State. We have a group of officials now who understand what the president wants. I think is leading to foreign policy initiatives that rolled out much more smoother, and we don't have problems with backbiting by senior officials who were brought in who didn't want to do what the president wants to do.
Yeah, I sense that as well very much. One thing that has worried me as someone, even as someone who entirely recognizes Israel's right to push back against the Islamic Republic, because people tend to forget, or they purposely overlook, the fact that the Islamic Republic has attacked Israel numerous times over recent years, especially since 7th of October, via its two proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, and of course the Houthis. But one thing that's worried me has been the discussion about potential boots on the ground in Iran. And Trump did talk for a while about potentially seizing Karg Island. There has been lots of discussion in the media about the potential of boots on the ground and how that would drag us into another Iraq. Do you think that was tough talk on Trump's part? Is there any prospect of that happening? What would your take be on any potential of boots on the ground in Iran?
Well, the president's official position is he's ruled nothing out. I don't support boots on the ground on even 1 inch of Iranian soil, with the exception of maybe rescuing pilots or some emergency. We shouldn't be occupying Iranian territory. I think Trump is moving towards wrapping this conflict up in a couple of weeks, moving to a new stage of a naval force in the Arabian Sea that would conduct airstrikes if necessary against Iran, but basically try to turn towards supporting the Iranian people and helping them in their efforts to overthrow this government, take back their government from this radical Islamist terrorist regime.
A couple of just final questions for you, Fred, is firstly just about the home front, talking about America, but also the United Kingdom and much of Europe. One thing that I found, I must say, quite dispiriting has been the protests we've seen, which have verged not only on opposing the bombing of the Islamic Republic, the regime, but also verged on supporting the Islamic Republic. We've seen people in London waving images of the Ayatollah and singing his praises, and some people even chanting victory to Iran. And then even aside from that more extreme expression, we have seen media coverage that is incredibly defeatist. I mean, the levels of moral defeatism that we've seen in the establishment media in relation to this conflict have horrified me. Is it similar in the United States? Do you think there is this culture of defeatism, and what might Trump or others do to counter that?
That's certainly true in the media. I didn't know there were demonstrations like that in the UK. I know there are large demonstrations in favor of what Trump is doing. There are members of the Iranian diaspora that are just enthusiastic that Trump is fighting for their country, fighting for their people. I saw demonstrations in several cities like this over the weekend. But look, the global left is going to be the way it is, and they're going to push this insane agenda no matter what. I think Trump just has to keep pushing forward and making the case to the American people on how we're winning, what we're accomplishing, and what the ultimate goals are of this operation.
Okay, Fred, my last question for you is just about the potential knock-on effects of what I'm sure you hope will be an American and Israeli victory, or certainly some kind of win in this conflict. What do you think will be the global repercussions of that? Are we potentially looking at not only the taming of a pretty wicked regime, but also an impact on China, an impact on Russia? I mean, regionally and globally, do you think there could be positive outcomes if the conflict goes in the direction that you would like it to?
I mean, ideally, we could have a democratic Iran, or at least Iran that's not run by this hateful Islamo-terrorist regime. This country has been a proxy for China. It's been providing weapons for the war in Ukraine to Russia. It could significantly change global power dynamics, and it will no longer, hopefully, will be a state sponsor of terror that destabilizes the Middle East. And I think that the Abraham Accords alliance is going to grow substantially, because states in this region now realize that Iran had prepositioned thousands of missiles to attack them. They now realize Iran was a much greater threat to their security than they thought. They're going to have to take some significant steps to defend themselves when this conflict is over.
Fred, thank you very much.
Good to be here.